Good evening. I am Steve Williamson, your village manager, and tonight we're going to talk about a very important subject to this village. We're going to talk about solid waste, or as some people say, we're going to talk trash. Right, Mariana? I appreciate everything you do for us, Mariana. I think you are the one who deals with our trash problems. So, seriously, going back to what I said before, solid waste. It's one of those things that people don't think about very much because I think we do it very well. But when we don't do it well, it becomes a problem. In reality, if you look across most cities, it is probably the most important service or one of the most important services that we provide to our residents. So tonight, we're going to talk to you about some of the things that we're considering as we're going out for a new request for proposal. The contract we currently have with our current vendor is coming to an end. So we want to make sure that as we go forward that we get the best service possible, and we want to make sure that we get what you want. We're going to talk about a couple options that are coming forward, types of services that you want, types of recycling that you're interested in, bulk waste. I'm going to turn this over to my team. I've got my CFO, Benjamin Nussbaum, here. I also have our Public Works Director, Chris Miranda. They'll talk to you through some of the details, surveys that we took before, and also some of the input we would like from you before we go out for RFP. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Chris. Turn it over to Benjamin. And again, thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for listening to us. Solid waste is very important. We want to make sure we hear your feedback.
All right, real quick, tonight we're going to get through, obviously, why we're here tonight, as Steve mentioned. The existing contract is coming to an end at the end of this fiscal year, so September 30th. So this process starts almost a year in advance of what we have to do to get ready to ultimately issue a request for proposal where different solid waste and recycling vendors are going to submit bids to do work in the Village of Key Biscayne. So one of the first things we did more than a year out, in the springtime, we actually did a resident survey. And this went out to all of our single family and our townhomes on Fernwood. So there's about 1,300 houses that receive municipal garbage and recycling services from the village. And the reason we asked these questions was it's really about the level of service, what the residents want that's going to help shape our contract. So when we write the scope for what we want bidders to put bids on, we wanted to align with what the requests are. So I wanted to highlight these two questions because these two are the ones that changed the most from when we did this survey 5 years ago. So we originally did the survey in 2020, pandemic time, and then we did it again 5 years later in spring of 25. So the first one here talks about which of the following options would you prefer for your solid waste and recycling collection services. The overwhelming majority, about 2/3, said curbside and about 1/3 said side yards. So this is a really big departure from how we currently provide service. Currently, we provide this higher cost white glove service where the garbage collector will come into your yard, pick up the garbage, and bring it to the bin. Obviously, it's more expensive. You're talking about more labor hours on a truck. And it looks like the overwhelming majority wants to change this, so for a lower cost, we're going to solicit bids for curbside services. The other tweak in this is we did ask the question a little bit differently. One of my frustrations with is how we asked this in 2020. We just asked which one did you want. We didn't mention that one was at a higher cost. Personally kind of reminds me if I ask my wife, does she want a Ferrari or a Honda? I know the answer, but that's not a realistic comparison. So I think it's important to mention that because the curbside has less labor, we are able to get more competitive pricing. The second question, and this is after Chris and I met with a lot of the garbage vendors to learn more about the recycling process and understand what's changed. A lot has changed in the 5 years since we did this survey last. So it was about limiting the recycling collection to certain recyclables because of, we all know what happened with glass, that it used to be very hot commodity. China was buying it, now they're not. Things in the recycling world seem to change faster, so we wanted to know, would residents support this if we have to restrict or limit the recycling collections based on, in an effort to reduce our contamination. So once again, overwhelming majority, this time about 71% said yes, they support that change, and about 30 wanted to keep it the single stream as it is. Next slide. And then this question, I wanted to reemphasize that this question was asked because we did look at some of the contracts with other municipalities in Miami-Dade County and Broward County based on frequency of collections, whether it be garbage, bulk pickups, recycling, et cetera. And this confirmed that residents were satisfied with the existing level of service. So Currently, we do the bulk waste on a monthly basis, and 72% agreed to keep it that way. So it was something if there was a demand to do it differently, we would obviously write that in the contract, but it looks like most were satisfied with the monthly service. Just in comparison, so put it into context, if you're receiving, a lot of municipalities receive garbage and recycling and bulk pickups from Dade County. If you're getting service from Dade County, you receive 2 on-demand pickups in a year. So we're obviously at a monthly level of service, we're doing 12 in a year. So it is a much nicer, higher level of service than the county's giving. But we saw some other municipalities have different amounts, but it looks like overwhelmingly we're going to keep that frequency to monthly. So now that we got the survey results, that's going to help shape, when we say write the scope of this RFP. So we mentioned one of the biggest things is, do we go to the side yard or curbside? And because of that overwhelming majority, we're going to solicit this bid for that curbside pickup. Now, what does that mean for residents? This is a big difference from what we're doing now. That means those 2 days a week, or on your once a week recycling, you're going to have to bring the bin to the curb for the garbage truck to automatically dump into the truck. And on the recycling side, we're still working through the details of how to optimize the recycling program. One of the ideas we had was differently than we're currently doing with our vendor, to keep the vendor more accountable into making sure the recycling is actually getting to the recycling plant, and we're having lesser levels of contamination. Is an improved public education campaign that our Public Works Department will be putting on. Additionally, we want to replace the bins, so as you open that bin, it's going to be very clear in the image exactly what components should go into that recycling bin. Okay, so one of the things we're writing into the contract is one of the things that didn't happen when we put this bid out in the pandemic is we only received 2 bids. We received a bid from our incumbent vendor, and we received a bid from a new vendor who actually selected. We want this bid to be more competitive. We understand that in Key Biscayne, there's only 1,300 homes. When you say in other municipalities, you're bidding for tens or hundreds of thousands of homes. And we understand the logistical issues with servicing an island where it takes 7 miles in, 7 miles out. In the garbage industry, just like most, time is money. One of the things we'd like to write in is what's called a non-exclusive franchise agreement, where these vendors would also have to compete for our commercials. So we're talking about our multifamily, our condos, and also our businesses, where they would provide a rate sheet of pricing that those condos or commercial entities could piggyback and say, yes, we like this pricing that the village has received. By enticing these vendors to make it competitive, we're hoping that we get better pricing than what these condos or commercial entities are paying now. The other thing that it does is, obviously I mentioned the competitive pricing, but one of the things we mentioned is we want less trucks on the road. Traffic's always the #1 issue in our resident complaints. If we're able to limit who's actually providing service in and on the island, we know who they are, who should be here, how many of them are here. So as an environmental concern, we're having less providers, and hopefully that entices them, if you have only 2 or 3, to provide that more competitive pricing. In terms of limitations, because like any change, there's pros and cons. One of the limitations could be that properties could have less or fewer choices in flexibility of how services are provided. We're going to ask for them to provide rate sheets of different frequencies, different size bins, based on what that commercial or condo entity could use. So we're hoping it's pretty exhaustive in what they could do. So as we took that community survey and are writing this RFP, these are kind of the things we're looking at in the new provider. So we want a reliable and efficient and sustainable waste management. The second one is holding our vendors more accountable. So right now, the issue with our current vendors, we may not know if all the recycling is getting to recycling bin. For those that know the garbage industry, the recycling business is tough, where obviously it's more economically beneficial for them to just take it to the dump. But that's not what we as a village should be demanding of our hauler. So we're going to write this contract in a way that's going to incentivize them to come back, where they have to show the justification for load tickets. These items were delivered to the recycling plant, and that's how they're going to be compensated. So it's putting much tighter strings and accountability on the vendor. The fourth one, adherence to environmental regulations. Obviously, if we're seeing the recycling happen, they'll also come back to us with the levels of contamination. If we need to kick up our educational campaign and let our residents know that, hey, this is not working, the vendor's losing money when you get to the recycling plant, we need to do a better job in terms of recycling. And also we're looking at exploring a longer term contract for stability and consistency. For those that see most of the village contracts, and we have a council member here tonight, most of our contracts are awarded on a 3-year basis with 2 one-year renewal options. In learning about this industry and the capital requirements necessary to bid, we are going to demand in this contract that we're getting newer trucks, maybe no older than 2 or 3 years old. So whoever wins this award may be having to buy a $500,000, $400,000, how much these trucks run? $500,000 truck. We're awarding a 3-year contract, might not be worthwhile for them to bid. So one of the things we've looked at is actually extending that length. We've seen other contracts go out 7 years or 10 years. So it's a departure from the way we do things, but we think that will entice more because we do want competitive bidding and competitive pricing. So we're going to tweak this one to actually go longer in a longer term contract to get that stability and consistency. And we've reached the end. So if there are questions and answers, I know folks are watching at home, they can't ask a question, but for those who are here, any questions, Chris and I are happy to answer them. And yes, sir.
If you could repeat that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm wondering about the options to have a separate container for yard waste so that yard waste doesn't have to go to a landfill. I mean, the bulk waste pickup is mostly yard waste, but if we don't separate that from white goods and other things, then you end up sending all that yard waste to a landfill, which is a huge waste.
It is a waste. The majority of the bulk that's collected in, or let's say green waste, is mulched and used in the landfills a lot of times as a layering to help process the material. Currently, we don't have any information from the county that they're going to provide something for the village residents to be able to do that. We are pretty far away from the closest county facility. Even the mini dumps are pretty far away, so for our residents to take things out there might not be feasible. I don't know if that answers your question.
Right, I had heard that the county was going to start a new program for handling yard waste from municipalities. I didn't know if there was any possibility that, you know, as part of the contract, you know, trucks could drop there because it might actually be cheaper for them than the fee they pay at a landfill.
We have not heard from the county is what I'm trying to say. Yes,
Right.
we have not heard that back from the county. We'll reach out to them and see where everybody falls, but we haven't heard from the solid waste department that they're
Okay.
reaching out to us.
Good question. Y'all say you're right on the money. I'm looking at the survey results because one of the questions we did ask, I didn't include as part of the presentation, was what type of bulk waste is remitted. And from 2020, 2025, consistently about 75% said branches, trunks, and yard trimming. So we know it's the number one item that's getting for the bulk pickup. So thanks.
Plastics. So plastics, big source of contamination, right? I mean, people, when they see they can recycle plastics, it gets very confusing for them. And so I think they have to be very clear when you lay out the contract, whether it's just going to be 1s and 2s or it's going to be all plastics that have a recycling symbol on them.
We don't have the exact details baked into this RFP yet. We are working through what materials exactly will be recycled. We're going to work with some industry leaders on what they're seeing getting recycled and how we limit what is not recyclable going into the stream. Part of that is the education. So we intend on doing a strong educational program. We basically have 3 types of recyclers, right? We have the confused but trying recycler. They're trying to put things in there. They're trying to be good about it. We have the wish cycling. They put everything in there and hopefully it's going to get recycled. And then we have the champion who knows what needs to go in there. As part of our campaign to educate the public, The recycling bins are going to be replaced, and they're going to have labels on them, not only with writing, but with pictures of what will be taken. Obviously, the recycling world is a little bit unstable as to what they take most times, but we're going to try and do it in a way where if we have to replace those labels, we can and update them in the future.
And as part of the educational campaign, would the village consider red tagging certain properties that have repeat ways of doing it the wrong way? Not as a violation, but as part of educational, to kind of like, hey, we're not going to pick up your recycling today because of these reasons. Please contact us and we'll help you do it right. Would you consider that?
Yes. It's going to be a multi-step process where we're going to, obviously through our Village Connect, put out the information. We're looking at possibly doing a flyer based on recycling only, so that we have attention to the recycling, not to a lot of different items. Sort of a kind of a 3x5 maybe postcard type informational document. And should somebody not recycle properly, there would be a notice given as to why it wasn't collected. Initially, we would go out and have an in-person communication with that resident to explain what we're finding in their stream and how we can improve what we're receiving. Very important that we try and educate the public, because every load that comes with one item that is not recyclable is taken to the landfill. That entire load, not just the one bin, but the entire load of that truck gets disposed of at the landfill. So we're trying to eliminate that altogether. Yes.
Obviously, education is important, but it's very confusing as a resident. For example, when you're throwing away a Gatorade bottle, the clear plastic part may have the one with the triangle, but has an orange cap, which I believe is not recyclable, and then has the ring that's left over from the cap, and it has a label, plastic wrapping label. So the education needs to include all the steps you have to go through to not contaminate what you're throwing out.
Right, and it goes as far as not only the cap, but actually removing. Many people will throw a bottle with a cap on it into the bin. What they don't realize is when that gets to the sorting facility crushes that cap goes out flying to injure somebody. So yes, the educational component would break it down in detail as to how to prepare the products to be put into those bins. Yes. And speaking of the bins, one of the financial burdens on this contract to the contractor that this is awarded to is we're going to replace all the bins throughout the village. It will be a phased type replacement, but it will all be done within a very short period of time so that the village receives all new bins for garbage and recycling both. Right now there's kind of a hodgepodge of bins out there, but we're going to make them all uniform.
And part of that process, we've also, you mentioned the code compliance question. We've seen houses, and I'm sure we've all seen them, that have 3, 4, or 5 mixed matched bins, etc. One of the ideas is you got to take all those and only give one per household. If a resident wants to purchase additional services, it have to do that with the vendor. So these are going to be new bins. The vendor's going to be instructed not to pick up the hodgepodge of different colored, different vendors. These are going to have Key Biscayne. They're ours. They're going to have Key Biscayne logo on them, and as Chris mentioned, the sheet about what goes in them. So part of this is accountability compliance, is giving a chance to really clean up kind of the stuff that's been out there accumulating over 15, 20 years, going through different solid waste vendors.
And again, going back to the recycling and the educational side, the biggest thing that we find contaminating the stream is bags, plastic bags. So we're going to do a concerted effort to try and keep residents from putting bags. A lot of people will bag their recycling materials and then throw them in the bin. We want them open. We want all that material in there loose. The bags get tangled in the machinery back at the multi-sorting facility, and it causes a jam up and stops the whole process. So the recyclers, a lot of times when they see a load, one bag, they dump the entire load aside. Yes, sir. Currently, the challenge is finding that space where we could have that location, that centralized location for people to bring their recyclables out to. I know that we have looked around for properties. The challenge north of us, obviously Crandon, south of us, the park, we don't really have a lot of options there. Right, but where would we put that bin? We've talked about possibly having it here within the village, the government center somewhere, or possibly the retail centers along Crandon might be willing to. We're exploring those options, yes. Yes, and the community groups that are helping look for that for us. Thank you. Thank you for coming out. And that's our presentation.